Today's story is about a British woman who claimed to have lived in ancient Egypt. Dorothy Louise Eady, also known as Omm Sety, was a British antiques caretaker and folklorist. All her life, she claimed to be the reincarnation of Bentrashyt, who was a priestess in the cult of Isis. She seemed to have intimate knowledge that lent credibility to her claims. Now, many historians have speculated that because she was a notable 20th century Egyptologist, her intimate knowledge had to have come from research and years of study. However, Dorothy knew details that had never been published. But before we get into the deep, if you like today's video, hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing to my channel. Okay, let's talk about when Dorothy first realized who she was. Dorothy was born in London in 1904 to Irish parents, and her remarkable story begins at the age of 3. You see, when Dorothy was 3, she fell down a flight of stairs in her family's home and was knocked unconscious. Now, of course, there are varying stories of what happened that day, with some saying that she was pronounced dead before suddenly reviving, while others claim she merely suffered a rare brain injury. Whatever the case, this fall would forever alter Dorothy's life. For one thing, her speech patterns had notably changed. For another, she kept asking her parents to take her home. But when they'd ask, "Where's home?" Dorothy couldn't say. Her mother and father were understandably baffled, but they carried on with daily life. Sometime within the first year of her accident, Dorothy's parents took her to an Egyptian exhibit at the British Museum. It's at this point her story truly takes a turn at unusual and crosses into the unknown. As Dorothy and her parents were walking among the artifacts, it is said that she suddenly pointed to a photo on the wall and cried, "There's my home." The image was of Seti I's temple in Abydos. Dorothy passionately insisted that she had once lived in that very building, but then noticed that something seemed to be missing. "Where are the trees? Where are the gardens?" she would ask, which seemed like fantasy to people because that information had not been known. And it seemed like the imagination of a child who had never seen the desert. As she grew older, Dorothy took to visiting the exhibits as often as she could. At some point, she caught the attention of distinguished Egyptologist E.A. Wallace Budge, who would be the person to encourage her to learn hieroglyphics. Her obsession with ancient Egypt only deepened as she matured. At 14, she began to describe her intimate relationship that she had with Seti I. She claimed to have been his lover in a previous life, and she even described visions of nighttime visitation in which his mummy would come to her bedside and tear away her nightdress. Yet, rather than being terrified by these nocturnal hallucinations, the girl was deeply obsessed with them. At their wits' end, Dorothy's parents committed her to one sanatorium after another. Nothing worked. She simply refused to let go of her beliefs, and at 16, she finally dropped out of school. But don't worry, her education was hardly at an end. She started studying at an art school in Plymouth, where her father was operating an early movie theater. It was here that she had the opportunity to play Isis on stage, a role for which she felt she was literally born to play. The next pivotal phase came at the age of 27 when she began writing for an Egyptian magazine in London. This is where she met Imam, whom she would later marry, and the couple would eventually settle in Cairo. She would have one son, and she would name him Seti I after her long-lost pharaoh lover. She herself would assume the moniker Omm Sety, which is Arabic for Mother of Seti. Ultimately, their marriage failed, lasting just a scant 2 years before Imam left her and moved to Iraq. But to be fair, Omm Sety clearly loved Egypt more than she loved him, so she stayed behind in Cairo, raising her son and working as a draftswoman with the National Department of Antiques. During her tenure there, she published numerous books and articles that are still widely admired today. Village life was not always easy for Omm Sety. Plenty of people were frightened by her, especially the locals. She was known to spend nights alone inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, or lay offerings at the feet of the Sphinx. These rituals spooked people and made her the subject of much gossip. In her 50s, Omm Sety was suddenly given an amazing opportunity to work alongside excavators at Abydos. Naturally, she sprang at this offer. Abydos was the site where Seti I and Bentrashyt had become lovers after all, and it was the very same place that she had pointed out in the British Museum at just the age of 4. In Abydos, she proved to be invaluable aid to the researchers. Among other accomplishments, she helped them locate the ruins of the gardens that she had described so long ago. Even more uncanny was the exchange she had with the chief inspector from Egypt's antiques department. He took her to Seti's temple and tested her claims. Standing there, in total darkness, inside his temple, he described a series of wall paintings to her. After each description, he would ask her to walk in the direction of the particular mural. She did so every time without erring. The inspector was naturally astonished. The locations of these paintings had never been published. So, how do you think she did it? Spending the rest of her days in Abydos, Omm Sety offered invaluable assistance to many researchers and excavators who frequently came through. She chose to remain at Abydos because she said it brought her peace. She believed that she was atoning for the sins of Bentrashyt. The opportunity to work along researchers had just been a pleasant perk. Now, it goes without saying, her contributions to Egyptology were undeniable. She had a seemingly remarkable understanding of hieroglyphics, and she was highly knowledgeable about the local ruins. In 1981, the year she died, she was featured in a National Geographic documentary entitled Egypt, The Quest for Eternity. Despite all her contributions to Egyptology, including countless essays on ancient folk practices, the locals were still fearful of Omm Sety. She went to her death at the age of 77, aware that no Christian or Muslim cemeteries would accept her. With that in mind, she began constructing her own tomb right in her back garden. Naturally, she wanted an underground chamber with a concrete slab. Yet, at the last minute, the health officials intervened, insisting that she be given a proper burial. A local Coptic cemetery finally relented, allowing her an unwanted plot out in the arid desert. But no marker would be placed above her grave. A pile of stones would have to do. Her anonymous burial marked an unceremonious end to a most unusual life. To this day, some 40 years later, efforts to disprove her claims are still underway. And that brings us to the end of today's video. If you liked today's video, hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching.